Hello, I'm Eleanor Peers, Arctic Information Specialist at the Scott Polar Research Institute Library. I'd like to tell you about a little-known genre of Arctic art, the ivory model, depicting scenes from the lives of Indigenous Siberian communities. The models you see were all made to be sent far away from their Siberian communities of origin, to the places and people at the heart of the European colonial empires. People from these indigenous communities did not have such things at home. They were made during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when museums and vast public exhibitions were generating a new vision of the globe, divided into civilized Europe and the rest. In fact, the world exhibitions, giant fairs that purported to display the entire world, were intended to raise public support for the colonial project. Displays of European technology and science were juxtaposed against exoticized presentations of non-European peoples and their extraordinary lives, to claim that colonization was spreading enlightenment and civilization across the world. These presentations could incorporate mannequins, artifacts, even living people, and models like these. Officials and merchants in the far-flung regions of the Tsarist Empire in particular would order models like these from local carvers, who would craft them for unknown audiences at Russian or European exhibitions and museums. Eventually, these models would be bought by either museums or private collectors. The emergence of museum collections was interlinked with a growing desire to collect exotic artifacts on the part of the European public. The attraction of objects from faraway places created a market for such souvenirs, and hence Siberians also started producing carvings they could sell to visitors. And so these carvings are not simply colonialist propaganda. They show how Siberian indigenous peoples adapted to their empire, developing new forms of art and industry in the process. In doing so, they help us appreciate the complexity of the colonial period. In fact, these models are as much the outward gaze of their Siberian creators, questioning the dominant conventions of imperial life, as they are exoticized representations to be examined by Europeans. They are a Siberian artist's impression of what a European audience wants to see. And they can also call many of our contemporary assumptions into question, assumptions about not only history, but also the inhabitants of the world in which we dwell. I have 3 examples to show you. The first 2 were displayed at the British Museum's recent exhibition on the Arctic. This model of a reindeer herder's camp is in the care of the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology at the University of Cambridge. We know very little about it. The reindeer herding community in question is described as Samoyed, a 19th century blanket term for the Nenets, Selkup, Enets, and Nganasan peoples. However, the people here could possibly also be Khanty. We see here several small scenes: childbirth, a bear hunt, harvesting reindeer horns, the arrival of a European traveller, which apparently demonstrate reindeer herding life. It is very unlikely that a reindeer herder carved this model, partly because it doesn't resemble Samoyed carving, but also because details of the reindeer sledges and harnesses are incorrect. And yet the carver of this model must have had some knowledge of these communities. He or she might have known, for instance, that Nenets women gave birth in separate, purpose-built dwellings, like the smaller tent on the left. We know much more about this model from the British Museum, thanks to a project funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council and the work of Yakutsk-based historians Semyon Gorokhov and Yefrosinya Nagovitsina. A craftsman called Nikolai Belousov from the indigenous Sakha people carved it near Yakutsk in around 1866 for the 1867 World Exhibition in Paris. It shows one of the Sakha people's most important yearly events, the Uhur. The Uhur celebrates the coming of summer, and indeed the entire relationship between humans and a living, benevolent natural world. Here we see fermented mare's milk being offered to the creative beings in nature as the community celebrates by wrestling matches and hopping races. The model's European audience wasn't to know this, and hence the model was named simply Model of a Summer Camp by its purchaser, Augustus Franks. Finally, I'd like to show you this inkstand, which was given to the Scott Polar Research Institute by the Arctic Institute in Leningrad in 1956. It's from the Bering region. It could have been carved by either Chukchi or Yupik people. Chukchi and Yupik communities have an ivory carving tradition that goes back centuries, if not millennia. Ivory figures were an important part of the way they conducted their own relationships with a living natural world. Things began to change in the late 19th century when traders and whale hunters appeared in the Bering region. Local people adapted their own tradition into new forms of carving, made specifically to sell to these visitors, like this inkstand. These intricate pieces tell many stories, and there are many more within them, waiting to be drawn out. Some of these stories are sad and violent. Others are more hopeful. When we engage with these models, we release their power to generate new stories, stories which can sometimes help heal the past. We also allow them to question our own perspectives. Could there be things in the models that we can't yet see, like the creator beings Franks couldn't spot? Thank you for watching, and I hope that one day you'll be able to see these models in 3D. Goodbye.